My name is Margaret Harper, though most people call me Maggie. I am 65 years old, a widow, and a mother of 2 sons. If you ask the neighbors, they'd say I'm a kind woman, someone who baked pies for church events, someone who watered her tomatoes faithfully every morning. If you asked me, I'd have said I was a woman who believed too much in family. The afternoon that tore that belief apart was supposed to be a celebration. We had gathered by the lake behind my house, my 2 sons, their families, and a few of Ethan's friends. The grill smoked, the lemonade switted in tall glasses, and I kept telling myself I was lucky. Lucky to still be here after heart surgery. Lucky to have children close enough to visit. Lucky to have a grandson who hugged me when he came in the door. But luck has sharp edges. Ethan Harper, my youngest at 34, was the center of attention that day. He's the polished one, the charmer, the boy with the easy smile and warm words. People say he has my husband Henry's charisma, though I know too well how charisma can be a mask. Ethan had just landed a promotion at work, and the barbecue was his idea, his victory lap. Daniel Harper, my oldest at 38, sat at the picnic table, stiff and quiet. Daniel has never been charming. He is blunt, sometimes painfully so. He doesn't flatter, doesn't sugarcoat. And I'll admit I often mistook his honesty for cruelty. Still, when Henry died, it was Daniel who carried me through the funeral, who fixed the leaking roof, who paid the overdue bills with money I didn't know he had saved. But Daniel doesn't smile for show, and that has always put him in Ethan's shadow. I should have noticed the tension in Daniel's jaw that afternoon. I should have recognized the flicker in Ethan's eyes when he called me over to the dock. "Come on, Mom," Ethan said, flashing that smile everyone loves. "Let me help you with the drinks." I stepped onto the dock, the wood warm under my sandals, the tray of lemonade balanced in my hands. I remember the smell of charcoal, the way Sandra, my daughter-in-law, Daniel's wife, sat on a lounge chair sipping wine, her lips pressed into a polite line. And then a sudden shove. Hard unexpected. The tray flew, glasses scattering like startled birds, and I was in the lake. The water was shockingly cold, 1,000 knives biting into my skin. My chest locked up, my shoulders screaming with pain the doctor had warned me about. I had been told to avoid strain, to avoid falls. Now I was drowning. Above me, Ethan's voice rang out high and mocking. "Don't be so dramatic, Mom." His friends laughed. One even clapped. I thrashed, my lungs burning, the water filling places air should be. Through stinging eyes, I saw them, Ethan smirking, hands on his hips, Daniel standing frozen, fists clenched but unmoving, Sandra sipping her wine as if nothing out of place had happened. Not one hand reached down. Not one voice cried out. And in that horrible silence, I understood. They weren't waiting to see if I could survive. They were waiting to see if I would sink. But they forgot something. I don't sink. I clawed upward, gasping, coughing, my knees scraping raw against the dock as I dragged myself back onto the wood. My shirt clung heavy with water, my breath ragged, my body trembling. I stood dripping, invisible, humiliated. Ethan's friends chuckled. Sandra raised her glass in a small, polished toast. Daniel's eyes met mine for one fleeting second, and then he looked away. I walked past them all, past the grill smoking with burgers, past the folding chairs lined up like an audience, and went inside. In the bathroom mirror, a ghost stared back at me. My gray hair plastered flat to my skull, my eyes red from lake water, my skin pale and sagging. I pressed my palms against the sink and whispered to the stranger. "Is this who I am to them? A ghost they can laugh at. Jason's, no. Ethan's, laugh still echoed in my ears, sharp and cruel. It wasn't the laugh of a boy who loved his mother. It was the laugh of a man who had learned that cruelty could be disguised as charm. That night, after the house grew quiet, I sat at my desk with a leather-bound journal I hadn't touched in months. My hand trembled as I opened it to the first blank page, and I wrote, "They will never get the chance to drown me again." The ink blood uneven, but the words felt like oxygen. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence press against me. It wasn't peace. It wasn't comfort. It was warning. Because they didn't just mean Ethan. It meant Daniel too. He hadn't pushed me, no. But he hadn't pulled me out either. And that hurt in a different way. Daniel had always been the honest one, the one who told me the truth even when I didn't want to hear it. He had been loyal, solid, dependable, and I had overlooked him. Maybe he thought I wouldn't want his help. Maybe he thought I didn't need it. Maybe, after all these years, he believed I loved Ethan more. And maybe he was right. The memories came rushing back. Daniel at 12, fixing the faucet with scraped knuckles, grinning when it finally stopped leaking. Ethan at 8, handing me a stick, figure drawing under a rainbow, saying, "Mommy, I made this for you." I had praised Ethan's scribbles, plastered them on the refrigerator for the world to see, while Daniel's practical courage went unnoticed. I had rewarded sweetness over substance, words over deeds. I had fed Ethan's hunger for approval and dismissed Daniel's quiet strength as coldness. Now I was paying the price. Through the thin walls, I heard laughter again. Ethan's voice carried, mocking, retelling my fall into the lake as if it were comedy. Mom flailing around like some old fish. He joked, and the laughter followed. I closed my eyes and saw him at 6 years old, barefoot in the yard, pressing dandelions into my hand. "You're the best, Mommy." That boy was gone. I picked up my pen again and wrote beneath the first line, "I raised them both, but I did not raise them equally." And tonight, I pay the price. The truth was heavy, but once it was written, I felt lighter. I closed the journal and sat in the silence of my room. The lake outside whispered through the open window, rippling in the moonlight. My house, once a place of warmth and family, now felt like a stage where I had been cast as the fool. But fools can learn, and ghosts can rise. That night, as I turned off the lamp, I made myself a promise. The days of blind love were over. The days of silence were done. They thought they had watched me sink, but they hadn't seen anything yet. The morning after the lake. The house had that peculiar hush a home gets when everyone is pretending nothing happened. The sun came up clean and indifferent. The countertops were where I'd left them. The kettle whistled the way it always had. I moved slowly, not from age so much as from knowing the floorboards could no longer be trusted to hold the same story. I brewed coffee stronger than usual and set out 2 mugs. Habit. For years I made coffee for sons who were already men, hoping the small ritual might make us all braver. The steam curled up like a prayer that didn't ask for much. When I reached for the sugar bowl, my shoulder ached with a memory my body would not let go of. The split second between a shove and the soundless dark of the lake. Footsteps in the hall. Daniel hovered in the doorway, as if the threshold itself were a witness, and he wasn't sure he had permission to cross. He looked tired in that honest way hard-working men do. Not the curated exhaustion of people who want the world to clap when they yawn. "Morning, Mom," he said. I nodded at the extra mug. "Sit. Drink before the day gets ideas." He did. For a long moment we just listened to the radio murmuring, the news anchor reading facts that belonged to other lives. Daniel wrapped his hands around the mug and stared at the steam like it could tell him how to begin. "I should've," he started, then stopped, pulled me out. I supplied. "Yes." He flinched like the word had found a bruise. "I didn't know if you wanted me to." You were getting there." "Getting there," I repeated, and took a sip of coffee. It tasted like stubbornness. "Tell me why you didn't move." He stared at his hands. "Because if I touched you in front of him, it would become a scene. He'd say I made it worse. He'd laugh harder. And you," he swallowed. "You've always hated it when I make a scene." 100 small vignettes lit up behind my eyes. Me scolding a teenager for calling out his brother's lie at a birthday party. Me telling him to lower his voice in the grocery store when he told me the coupon deal was a scam. Me pressing a hand to Daniel's forum in church when he asked the finance committee where last year's donations had gone. "Stop, please. Not now. Don't make it worse." "I taught you that," I said, the words landing like a slow confession. "I taught you to be quiet to protect my peace. I thought it was peace. It wasn't." Daniel's jaw worked like he was chewing a thought too tough to swallow. "You always gave him more room. He asked for it prettier," I said, and set the mug down. "You never asked, you just did." He laughed short and humorless. "So that's the trick, huh?" Asked sweetly. "Get the world. It shouldn't be," I said, but in this house it was. The kettle clicked as it cooled. Somewhere deeper in the house a door thudded. The kind of careless slam that doesn't require an apology, because the person slamming believes air owes them passage. Ethan's voice carried from the hall, cheerful as a ringtone. "Mornin', sunshine," he called, breezing into the kitchen like a commercial for a better sun. He kissed my cheek the way he always does when there's an audience, even if the audience is just the ache in my shoulder. "How's my favorite lady?" I looked at him for what he was in the bright, merciless light of day, a handsome mask that had learned its lines too well. He was freshly shaved, hair neat, shirt tucked in like respectability were a uniform you could buy if you knew your measurements. Fine, I said. The word felt like an index card I'd used too often. And don't call me sunshine. He blinked, amused, then turned his attention to the coffee. You two look like a pair of detectives, he teased, pouring himself a cup. Solving the case of who forgot the milk. Daniel's eyes cut to mine, searching. I kept my face very still. It was a skill I had learned in marriage, and refined in motherhood, the quiet that lets other people show you what they do when they think they are safe. Ethan took a sip, made a performative face at the strength. Whoa, that'll melt a spoon. Then, as if remembering his cue. About yesterday. The kitchen listened with us. You know I was just messing around, Mom. You're a good swimmer. Always have been. He grinned at Daniel, seeking a co-conspirator he hadn't earned. I swear people are so dramatic these days. The words slid across the table like a knife I'd already learned not to catch. Dramatic. When a person calls you dramatic, what they often mean is please stop making me look at the harm I caused you. I'm 65, I said mildly. I had heart surgery this spring. Ethan's smile held. His eyes did not. Right. But you're tough, Mom. Tougher than anyone I know. He reached for my hand the way you reach for a prop, not a person. No harm done. Daniel's mug hit the table harder than ceramic likes to be treated. He stood, the chair legs biting the tile. I've got work. Call me if you need anything, he said to the air over my head. To me, he added, mean it. When he was gone, Ethan lifted one shoulder, half shrug, half smirk. You know how he is. Always on a hair trigger. I do, I said. He trips whenever someone steps on a line they shouldn't have drawn. He missed it or pretended to. He rinsed his cup like a saint, left it in the sink like a boy, and kissed my cheek again, because that's how his exit lines are written. When he was gone, the room exhaled. I put both hands on the counter and bowed my head. The tile was cool against my palms. The radio had moved on from news to weather, promising clear skies and a light breeze. Like there was any mercy in the air. I didn't cry. Not because I'm strong, because I was busy remembering. There is a photograph somewhere, maybe in the hall closet, maybe tucked behind the old tax records, of Daniel at 7, shoelaces untied, holding a frog he's terrified will die if he squeezes too hard. Next to him, Ethan at 3, cheeks stuffed with stolen grapes, grinning like a moon. I loved that grin, I loved feeding it. When Henry traveled for work, and later when traveling meant drinking in a Motel 6 3 towns over, I learned to split myself in two. The practical half-tied shoes. Killed spiders, paid bills late but paid them. The tender half laid out little rituals that made the house feel less like a bunker and more like a promise. Pancakes shaped like letters, Friday movie nights with blankets built into forts, silly songs that didn't ask anyone to be brave to sing them. Daniel lived in the practical half with me. He learned to carry grocery bags the way some boys learn to carry footballs. He knew the dates that mattered and the routes to the urgent care clinic and how to snap a shoot-off valve when a pipe began to scream. He never asked to be thanked. He just stood in the space where something heavy needed holding. Ethan lived in the other half, the half I kept soft so none of us would break. He ran headfirst into whatever was bright. He drew pictures with sun, yellow crayons that didn't match the sky, and I praised them because I wanted that sky in the house. He told me jokes he didn't quite understand, and I laughed because laughter felt like a rope I could pull us all up with. One spring, when Ethan was 9 and Daniel was 13, a vase went missing from the mantel. It was not valuable, except it was. My sister had given it to me the year Henry swore he'd quit. I found the vase 3 days later, in the backyard, in a grave of poor intentions and 2 shallow shovelfuls of dirt. Ethan cried fat tears and said he didn't mean to break it. He'd been practicing his soccer kicks inside because it was raining and Mom, the ball, didn't know the rules. Daniel, who had been at his part, time job stacking canned beans on shelves in a fluorescent, buzzed grocery store, watched me choose the easier story. Go hug your brother, I told him. He broke your favorite thing, Daniel said. He told the truth, I said. No, Daniel said and walked away before the words could grow teeth. He told the truth you wanted. I followed Ethan's tears with a mop and left Daniel's words on the floor where they could cut us later. Another winter. The power went out in a storm mean enough to pull down a 100-year oak. We moved into the living room like pioneers, dragging mattresses, pooling blankets, sharing heat. Daniel fed the fireplace like a man striking a bargain with the dark. Ethan sang the alphabet to the shadows. I watched the ceiling and thought, we are a tiny village, and I am the mayor who forgot to salt the roads. In the morning, when the coffee maker was a mute statue and the house still smelled of smoke, Daniel went out to dig the sidewalk free. Ethan complained his boots were tight and offered to man the flashlight. I kissed both their foreheads, thanked them both with the same voice, and wondered why one boy looked lit from within by my gratitude, and the other looked like a man trying to hold a door against a flood. You can love two people fully and still distribute your attention like a crooked table, gives every glass a different chance at standing. That is a failure you only confess when the house is empty enough to hear yourself. I went to the hallway closet and pulled down the box labeled Yntar Messi with a black marker that should have warned me it lied. The box held scarves that smelled faintly of last year's cold, and a muddle of things that do not belong anywhere, until you need them: light bulbs, mismatched gloves, a Ziploc bag of screws that probably fit something. At the bottom, under a dusty blue scarf Daniel's first girlfriend had knit for him, I found a stack of old school notices and permission slips, a museum of life admin I handled without anyone seeing. A slip caught my eye. 3rd grade. Parent-teacher conference notes. Daniel direct, strong comprehension, leadership tendency, benefits from flexibility. Ethan charming, bright, excels at presentations, needs structure for follow-through. I remembered sitting in those tiny chairs, nodding at those tidy phrases as if they were maps. Flexibility, structure. Such tidy words for what it takes to raise a person. Behind the slips, a folded note I didn't recognize. I sat on the floor, the box a table between my knees, and opened it. The paper was cheap and lined, written in Daniel's handwriting when he was maybe 15, letters too proud to sit quietly on the line. Mom, it read. I paid the past due on the power bill. I used the lawn money. Please don't be mad. You can pay me back when it's not Christmas. Ethan's got the school play. I'll be fine. I had no memory of this. I tried to conjure it: a boy standing in line at the utility office, shivering in a jacket that didn't know what to do with his new shoulder width, handing over crumpled bills, pushing other people's summer into neat piles. Me, meanwhile, maybe sewing a stray button onto Ethan's costume, telling him he looked handsome under the kitchen light while the house hummed with a safety his brother had bought us both. I folded the note back up slowly and set it on my lap. The floor beneath me felt very stable and too far away. I'd always told myself I didn't play favorites. I love them both, and I do. But loving isn't the same as seeing, and seeing isn't the same as choosing. Choices are where love either gets hands or stays poetry. Mom, Ethan's voice floated from the hall. I tucked the note under the scarf the way you hide a bruise with a long sleeve. You need anything from town? I have what I need, I said. He leaned against the doorway, thumbs in his pockets in a pose practiced to look unpracticed. Figured I'd run a few errands, maybe grab lunch. He flashed the smile. You should rest. Doctor's orders. I looked at his face and tried, for once, to see the boy and the man at the same time. The boy who brought me dandelions. The man who thinks an apology is a joke if people laugh. What had I taught him about what women forgive? What had the world taught him about where tenderness ends and leverage begins? Rest would be good, I said. Perfect. He popped upright, relieved to have been useful in a way that didn't require labor. I'll text you. Love you. I didn't answer. Not because it wasn't true. Because I had always answered fast, and maybe speed was part of the problem. When he was gone, the house settled around me, no longer a stage. I carried the winter box back to the closet and placed it on the top shelf. Then I went to my room and opened the journal again. They will never get the chance to drown me again. Beneath it I wrote, smaller, like a secret I trusted to grow, I will not rescue the person who pushed me. I will rescue the part of me that told him he could. I underlined it once. Not for drama. For proof. In the afternoon I drove to the community garden because the tomatoes do not care about your family politics. They ask for water and reward you with the extravagance of a fruit that tastes like August. It's good to tend something that gives what it promises. Mrs. Carter. Ruth. If I am willing to risk affection. stood in her plot wrestling with trellises made from salvaged pallet wood. She waved when she saw me and came over with her usual brisk kindness. "You look steadier today," she said, and handed me a spare length of twine-like friendship. "I'm practicing," I said. "Practice makes patterns," she said. "Patterns make freedom." We tied up the drooping vines in companionable silence. After a while she said, "You always drove the carpool when the boys were little. Rain or shine?" "I like the shine," I said. "You drove in the rain," she said. "Because neighbors remember the part you'd rather rewrite." I wiped my forehead with the back of my wrist and squinted at the sky. "Ruth," I said, surprising us both, "did you ever love one of your kids wrong?" She thought about it. "I loved them the way I knew how at the time," she said. "When I knew better, I tried better. The trying's the only thing they can't take away from you." I nodded. The twine held, modest and sure. We watered. The soil drank like a polite guest. On my way back to the car, my phone buzzed with a text from Danielle. "You okay for dinner?" "I can swing by." "No pressure," I typed, then erased 3 drafts that sounded like either apology or invitation. Finally I sent, "I have pasta. If you come, bring your appetite and your silence until I run out of mine." He replied with a thumbs up that somehow felt like restraint and respect at once. I cooked enough for 2 and set the table without ceremony. When Daniel arrived, he entered like a person who lives here and remembers to knock anyway. We ate without filling the air with the weather. Halfway through, he set down his fork. "When I was 16, he said, like a man pulling the pin out of a grenade whose time is up, I asked Dad why he always took Ethan to the hardware store and not me. He said, because Ethan makes people smile, and you make them think." He said it like thinking was a problem the store couldn't afford. "Do you know what I told myself?" I asked. "That I had to be the smile, then. Because your father was already the problem the house couldn't afford." Daniel huffed something like a laugh. "You were never the problem. I was the mayor who forgot to salt the roads," I said. "And you were the plow. And Ethan, well, he thought winter was a story and spring a right." We sat with that a minute. "I found your note," I said softly. "About the power bill at Christmas. You said I could pay you back when it wasn't Christmas." "I didn't." "I'm sorry." He blinked once, slow, like a man backing away from a cliff he didn't know he was on. "I don't remember writing it," he said. "That's how it goes," I said. "The things we do to keep the lights on become invisible if the lights come on." He shook his head, looked away. "What are you going to do, Mom?" I thought of the journal, the line with backbone, the box in the closet, the frog in a careful pair of hands. I thought of the lake and the shove and the word dramatic. I thought of Ethan's mouth, quick with apologies that never touched his eyes. "I'm going to stop teaching the wrong lessons," I said. "And then I'm going to draw a new map." "Do you want help?" he asked. I looked at his face, the stubborn set of his mouth, the eyes that had learned to scan a room for what might break, and saw the boy who had always shown up with a wrench instead of a speech. "Yes," I said. "But not the kind where you storm in and fix it for me. The kind where you witness me fixing it for myself." He leaned back, nodded, and finished his pasta like a man honoring the terms of a treaty. After he left, I washed dishes long after they were clean and let the hot water run over my fingers like absolution. The house felt less like a stage and more like a place where a woman had decided where the chairs go. In my room, I opened the journal again and added 3 small lines like stepping stones. "I will not confuse charm with character. I will not confuse quiet with consent. I will not confuse love with permission." I closed the book and set it neatly by the lamp, the way you place a tool you plan to use tomorrow. Outside, the lake kept its secrets. Inside, I set down mine, one by one, until the floor felt level under my feet. It is a particular kind of grief to realize the thing you called peace was only a well-kept silence. I have loved 2 sons with the same heart in different hands, and my hands often reached for the child who asked the prettier way. But I am not bound to yesterday's mistakes unless I keep choosing them. Love grows teeth when it finally bites through the stories that kept it small. Tonight, I forgive the mother I was and make room for the woman I intend to be. If this story speaks to you, share it with someone who needs the reminder. Like and subscribe so you won't miss the next part of Maggie's journey. And tell me in the comments, when did you realize the difference between peace and silence? The night carried a kind of stillness that isn't silence, it's calculation. The lake behind my house had gone black, the surface glinting like cold metal under the moon. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of leftover pasta and the faint tang of dish soap. I had gone to bed early, or at least that's what everyone thought. But sleep doesn't come easily when your bones still remember water closing over your head. The house after midnight always had its own voice. The floorboards creaked like old friends gossiping. The refrigerator hummed like a distant warning. And the lake outside breathed in slow laps against the dock, a sound I used to find comforting. Tonight, it was a reminder. A metronome ticking out the fact that I was still here, still alive, still fighting for breath no one had offered me. I had gone to my bedroom early, or at least pretended to. The lamp by my desk glowed faintly, casting a circle of light over my journal. The first 2 vows I'd written were there staring back at me, as though waiting for company. They will never get the chance to drown me again. I raised them both, but I did not raise them equally. And tonight, I pay the price. The pen lay across the page, heavy in its silence. That's when I heard it, Ethan's voice, muffled but distinct, slipping down the hallway from the living room. At first, I thought maybe he was talking to Sandra or one of his friends. But then I caught the cadence, the half-laughs, the drawn-out pauses, the little bragging lilt he used on the phone. "College funds basically mine," he said. I sat up straighter, my heart thudding. Dad says once Mom's out of the picture, it's set. 50 grand easy. I'll transfer it as soon as it clears. The words rang like a gunshot. Out of the picture. For a second, I thought maybe I had misheard. Maybe I had finally drifted into one of those nightmares, where the people you love speak in cruel tongues. But then his laugh followed, sharp and self-satisfied, the same laugh he had used that afternoon when I was thrashing in the lake. He wasn't joking, he wasn't being careless. He was plotting. I gripped the arms of my chair to keep from falling. My mind scrambled through years of images, birthdays, holidays, piano recitals, school plays. Ethan, always smiling, always putting an arm around me when cameras were out. Ethan, the boy who told me once at 6 years old, "You're the best." Mommy, pressing dandelions into my hand like they were jewels. Had it all been rehearsed? Had I been so desperate to feel adored that I'd let performance stand in for love? I remembered the year Daniel was 14 and Ethan 10. We were in the living room one evening. Daniel had come home from shoveling snow for the neighbors, his boots caked, his fingers red. He handed me a crumpled $5 bill. "Keep it," I told him. "Buy yourself something." "I did this because the sidewalk was dangerous," he said. "I don't need the money." And then Ethan walked in with a paper crown from Burger King, plopped it on my head, and said, "Mom's the queen." Guess which moment I retold to my friends at church the following Sunday. I had laughed, patted Ethan's head, and called him my sunshine. Daniel had gone to his room without a word. And now here I was, 65 years old, finally seeing that I had mistaken crowns for character. I pressed both hands over my mouth, as if I could push the sound of Ethan's words back down his throat. But the damage was done. He wasn't just cruel. He wasn't just careless. He was waiting for me to disappear. I bent over my journal, snatched up the pen with trembling fingers, and wrote so hard the nib tore the paper. They think I am a fund to be transferred. They forget I am still the one holding the pen. The ink smeared, blotchy, jagged. It didn't matter. The vow had teeth. For the first time in years, my body didn't feel frail. It felt electric. Dangerous. Not because I had the strength to shove back, but because I had the clarity to choose. I sat there in the lamp's glow, memories pouring out of me like water through a split dam. Ethan at 16, borrowing my car with a smile and returning it 2 days later with the gas tank empty. "Sorry, Mom, I'll fill it tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. Ethan at 22, standing in my kitchen, asking for a loan to cover rent. He hugged me so tight, whispered, "I don't know what I'd do without you." I wrote him a check that same night. He never paid it back. And then Daniel, my eldest, who once missed his own high school dance to drive me to the ER when I fainted from exhaustion. He had never asked for anything, never demanded repayment. And I had thanked him with silence, while Ethan was thanked with applause. I covered my face with both hands and whispered into the dark, "God forgive me. I raised them unequally. I fed the wrong fire." Ethan's laugh carried again from the hall. "Mom's not going to argue. She never does." Daniel's too uptight to notice anyway. This is basically done. I wanted to storm down the hall and confront him. I wanted to scream until the walls split. But I didn't. Not yet. Because something deeper than rage whispered to me, not now. Not loud. Not like this. For once in my life, silence could be my ally. I closed the journal and pressed it to my chest like armor. The next morning, the house smelled of coffee and bacon, the ordinary perfume of family breakfasts. Ethan strolled into the kitchen humming, kissed the top of my head, and said, "Sleep well, Mom." I looked up at him, and for the first time in decades, I didn't answer with a smile. I just held his gaze until his own faltered, until he turned away toward the frying pan, as if nothing had cracked between us. But something had. Inside me, a door had opened, and once open, it would not shut. That afternoon, I walked into the attic. Dust motes swirled in the light from the small window, a galaxy of things forgotten. I pulled down the tin container where I had kept documents, birth certificates, insurance papers, property deeds. My hands lingered on the edges of each folder. There, buried beneath years of paper, was the trust I had set up when Ethan was 10. $50,000, saved penny by penny, meant for his education, his future. I had thought it was an act of love. He thought it was an inevitability. A prize waiting to be claimed the moment my breath left me. I read every line, slow and deliberate. And I realized something that made me smile, small and dangerous. Ethan's assumption wasn't fact. That money was still mine. Every signature still mine. Every decision still mine. He had built his arrogance on air. And I would let him. I would let him believe the ground beneath him was steady. While beneath it, I was already digging a new foundation. That night, I opened my journal again. Beneath the vows I had written, I added one more: my silence is not surrender. It is a warning. I underlined it twice, then closed the book, because Ethan thought he was waiting for me to sink. He didn't know I was already learning how to swim in ways he would never see coming. And he had no idea that soon, I would not be swimming at all. I would be standing on solid ground, holding the pen, writing the ending he never imagined. The attic air clung to my lungs like old regrets. Dust motes swirled in golden shafts of light, and each box I opened seemed less about storage and more about confession. The folders in my hands weren't just paper. They were records of the story I'd written for my sons without ever realizing how crooked my handwriting had been. I sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by relics. A faded birthday card, a broken toy truck, a ribbon from a science fair. Each object carried a memory, and each memory carried a verdict. I remembered Ethan at 10, begging for a new bike. His old one was still good enough. The chain just needed oiling, the seat a little tightening. But he had seen a glossy red mountain bike in a store window and talked about it for weeks. "Please, Mom," he had said, wrapping his arms around me, pressing his cheek against mine. "I'll ride it every day. I'll be the best kid you ever had." It was a ridiculous promise, but my heart melted. I scraped together the money, skipping a doctor's appointment for myself that month. When Daniel came home from his after-school job bagging groceries and saw Ethan with the new bike, he asked quietly, "Where's mine?" "You already have one," I told him. He had stared at me, his eyes flat, then turned away. I told myself it was just teenage sulking. But now, decades later, I saw it for what it was. A boy realizing he would never win a contest he hadn't even known he was in. Another memory: the school auditorium, when Ethan was 12. He had landed the lead in the school play, mostly because he charmed his teacher into believing he belonged there. I sat in the front row, clapping until my hands stung. Afterward, I hugged him tight. "You were amazing," I said. "You're going to be a star." Daniel, 16 at the time, had been working backstage. He had built the set with his own hands, hammering boards late into the night. When he came up to me afterward, sweaty and tired, I patted his shoulder absently. "Good job." "Sweetheart," I said, still glowing from Ethan's performance. "But your brother was brilliant, wasn't he?" Daniel didn't answer. He just walked away, shoulders hunched, swallowed by the shadows of the stage he had built. There was the Christmas Daniel was 17. Money was tight that year. I had been late on the mortgage. Daniel had gone out in the cold, chopped down a small pine from the back lot of a neighbor's land, and dragged it home on his own. We decorated it together, though I could see he was exhausted. Ethan, 13, had made a handmade ornament out of glitter and glue. He placed it on the very top branch, and I burst into tears. hugging him, telling everyone who visited how thoughtful Ethan was. Daniel had just stood there, quiet, watching. "Why are you always so serious?" I had asked him sharply. "Can't you let your brother have his moment?" Now, sitting in the attic, I felt those words like knives turned inward. Daniel hadn't wanted to steal Ethan's moment. He just wanted me to notice that he had carried an entire tree through the snow to make our house feel like Christmas. I leaned against a box, my chest heavy with realization. Ethan had learned early that words and sweetness earned him rewards. Daniel had learned that no matter how much he did, he would always be measured against the charm of his brother's smile. And I, God forgive me, had been the one who taught them that lesson. I rubbed my temples, whispering to the dust, "I loved you both." But I showed it wrong. I fed the mask and I starved the truth. Downstairs, I heard Ethan's laugh again, drifting through the vents. Mom won't argue. She never does. The laugh struck me differently now, braided with every memory of every time I had chosen flattery over honesty. I realized with a kind of sick clarity that Ethan wasn't just cruel by accident. He was cruel by education, and I had been one of his teachers. I returned to my journal that night and wrote, "The mask slips when the room is empty. I see now what I built with my silence. Daniel built the walls of this house. Ethan painted them bright. I chose the paint over the walls. That mistake ends here." The ink soaked deep like a wound finally bleeding clean. I closed the book and stared at the ceiling until dawn. Ethan thought he was clever, thought the money was his, thought his mother was already out of the picture. But he had forgotten something vital. The picture still holds the pen. And soon, the picture would write a story that could not be erased. The morning after I wrote my vow, the house was still, as though it sensed a shift beneath its foundations. Ethan had gone out early, leaving his mug in the sink as usual, the coffee ring a small signature of entitlement. Daniel had texted a short, "You okay?" but didn't come by. Sandra's voice carried faintly through the wall, already on the phone with her friends, talking about a new pilot studio in town. I needed air. I stepped out onto the porch, wrapping my cardigan tight against the breeze. The lake rippled in the morning light, the same water that had nearly swallowed me whole. My knees trembled at the memory, but I didn't look away. A car pulled into the driveway, not Daniel's, not Ethan's. It was an old Chevy truck. The kind that sounded like gravel had taken up permanent residence under the hood. When the door opened, out stepped Frank Dawson, my oldest friend. Frank had been Henry's drinking buddy once, but unlike my husband, Frank had learned when to stop. A retired sergeant, he still carried himself like a man who gave orders. His hair was mostly gone, his back a little bent, but his eyes, sharp blue, missed nothing. "Morning, Maggie," he said, carrying a brown paper bag and 2 styrofoam cups of coffee. "You look like hell." "Nice to see you too," I muttered, though the corner of my mouth nearly smiled. "Sit," he ordered, already striding up the porch steps. "I'll pour." I obeyed, because that's what you did with Frank. He set the cups down, handed me one, and unwrapped 2 pastries from the bag. "Drink, then talk." I stared into the steaming black coffee, buying time. Finally, the words broke free. They pushed me. Frank froze. "Into the lake," I nodded. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, leaning back with a low whistle. "And nobody helped you." They laughed, I said flatly. Silence stretched between us, heavy and unblinking. Frank tapped his fingers on the armrest, slow and deliberate. "Then it's time." "Time for what?" I asked warily. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a folded envelope, and slid it across the table like a poker hand. Inside was a business card, simple, no-nonsense font. "Thomas Green Estate Law." I looked up sharply. "You kept this." "I keep everything," Frank said. "Especially when my best friend is handing out his legacy, like Halloween candy to people who'd rather watch him drown." I let the card rest in my hand. The paper felt heavier than it should have. "I don't know, Frank. It feels so final." "You want final," he shot back. "You just don't want guilt." "That's different." "I wanted to help Jason," I whispered, using my grandson's name for the first time that morning. "I wanted to give him chances I never had." "And you did," Frank said firmly. "You paid for braces, soccer trips. Hell, you even bought that damn guitar he never touches anymore. You let Mark and Linda live here rent, free 1 whole summer. You still had to buy your groceries on credit that August." "Remember," I winced. "I had almost forgotten. I wanted to help. I said weakly. I know, Frank said, his voice softening. You're better than them. That's the problem. We sat in silence for a while, sipping coffee. Outside, the lake shimmered deceptively peaceful. Listen, Maggie, Frank said at last. You don't need revenge. You need release. There's a difference. Release? I repeated, tasting the word. Exactly, he said. You don't have to hurt them. You just have to stop letting them hurt you. My chest tightened. I don't even know where to start. Start here? Frank said, tapping the card. Call Green. Tell him the truth. Every ugly detail. Let him guide you. My throat closed. If I do this, Frank, it means cutting Ethan out. Frank's eyes didn't waver. Kid cut himself out the moment he shoved you in that lake. The truth landed like a stone, heavy but undeniable. I closed my eyes. Ethan's grin flashing against the darkness, Daniel's silence beside him, Linda's smirk behind her wine glass. When I opened them, Frank was still watching me steadily. You're not alone, Maggie, he said. Not anymore. You've got me. And you've got this pen in your hand. I realized I was clutching my journal, still open on the table. The ink from last night glistened faintly in the light. They think I am a fund to be transferred. They forget I am still the one holding the pen. My phone buzzed then, a voicemail notification. Unknown number. I pressed play. Mrs. Harper, this is the office of Thomas Green, returning your inquiry. We can set an appointment this week if you're available. Please call back. I looked at Frank, stunned. He smiled faintly. I may have nudged the process along. You called him. I told you, Frank said, leaning back with a grin. I keep everything, including promises I made to your husband before he passed. Henry once told me, if Maggie ever forgets her worth, remind her. So here I am. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. My throat closed, my eyes stung. The mention of Henry pierced through armor I didn't know I'd been wearing. Damn it, Frank, I muttered, blinking hard. Don't thank me, he said, standing. Thank yourself when you finally stop letting them write your story. He clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. Call Green today. Then he left through the side door, closing it softly behind him, leaving the scent of strong coffee and old loyalty lingering in the air. I sat alone again, staring at the card in my hand. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt armed. That afternoon, I dialed the number. This is Margaret Harper, I said when the line clicked. My voice was steady. I need an appointment. And as I set the phone down, I looked out the window at the lake once more. The water was calm now, but I knew better. Beneath the surface, currents shifted, ready to pull. This time, I wouldn't be the one dragged under. Thomas Green's office didn't look like the kind of place where drama happened. That was the first thing I noticed. No dark mahogany panels, no intimidating rows of leather, bound books no one touched. It smelled faintly of paper and lemon polish, the kind of quiet confidence that says, everything you sign here will outlive the people who think they can outtalk it. The receptionist, a calm woman with steel, gray hair and a nameplate that read Nora Vance, walked me in. She offered water, her tone kind but steady, then closed the door behind me with a soft click that sounded like a seal. Thomas stood to greet me. He was in his early 50s, tall, with a handshake that was steady, dry, present. The kind that makes you feel seen without being studied. Mrs. Harper, he said warmly. I'm Thomas Green. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Call me Margaret, I said. Then, surprising myself, I added, or Maggie, if it makes it easier to tell me hard things. He smiled the way good lawyers do. Kindness wrapped around an unblinking kernel of truth. All right, Maggie. Please. Sit. He didn't waste time. You mentioned on the phone, he said, sliding a thin folder toward him, that there is an education fund in your name. Yes, I said. Set aside when my youngest was 10, untouched since then, still solely under your control. Yes, his pen hovered. And yet your family assumes otherwise. My son told someone it's his. I said bitterly. My daughter-in-law calls me a liability. My grandson laughs while I drown. The word liability tasted like metal in my mouth, even here. Thomas didn't flinch. He let the word land where it belonged, in the room between us. Then he leaned forward. Okay, he said softly. Then there are two conversations we can have. One is about money. The other is about boundaries. They look similar on paper. I gripped my knees. Which one keeps me breathing? Both, he said. And with a click of his pen, It felt like a ceremony had begun. "First," he said, drawing a list on his pad, "we lock the doors. Audit every account. Move anything requiring your signature into a structure that doubles the friction. No e-signature after 48 hours. No online access without an in-person token. Alerts so any inquiry on your accounts pings me directly. Credit frozen at all 3 bureaus. Safe deposit box at a credit union under your key. New mailing address for financial correspondence." He slid the paper toward me. "If they're counting on drift, we take away the tide." It was clinical, clean, lawful. And yet it calmed me in a way the lake never could. "And second," I asked. He held my eyes. "Withdraw your life in ink, the way you want it lived. Power of attorney, medical and financial, to someone you trust. Healthcare directive witnessed. A revised will with a no contest clause. A letter of intent I can read to any interested party at your request. Or when you instruct me to do it without you in the room." I breathed out slowly. Margaret's voice came back to me. My late husband's words, long buried. "If you're going to be quiet, make sure the paper speaks." "I want Frank Dawson as my healthcare proxy," I said without hesitation. "And if he can't, then Nora. Not your sons, not Mark, not Ethan, not Sandra. Not any of them," I said firmly. He nodded, wrote it down, and didn't ask why. He didn't need to. "Tell me about your grandson," Thomas said, flipping to a clean page. I did, not everything. Enough. The guitar, the asthma, the dandelions, the shove. When I finished, his pen hadn't moved for a long time. He let the silence sit there like a witness. "I don't want revenge," I said finally. "I want release." His mouth curved faintly. "Frank's phrasing," he said. "Not new to me." "Then we'll structure the release," he continued. "One piece at a time." Over the next hour, he built walls around me with paper and signatures. Safe deposit box appointment 200 at Glenview Credit Union. P.O. box reserved under my full name. Keys ready. Evaluator appointment discreet entrance Friday at 10:00 a.m. To record my decisional capacity before anyone could whisper. Facility. No contest clause added to draft will. If an heir challenged and lost, they lost everything. Every time I signed a form, every time Nora appeared with yellow flags for initials, I felt something settle in my bones. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even relief. It was control. Finally, Thomas slid one last document into the center of the desk. "This," he said, "is the letter. We won't send it now. We'll keep it in my file. When and if you ask, I'll call them in and read it exactly as written. Not to punish." To Rickard, I looked down. The first line was mine, copied from my journal. "To those who assumed my silence meant agreement, I gave everything once. I won't die twice." I signed the bottom, not because I planned to send it today, but because I wanted it ready. Silence is only power if it has a shape to fill. When we were done, Thomas stood. "Walk with me." He led me down a short hallway lined with photographs. Families in front of houses, elderly couples at long tables, a young woman in a college sweatshirt holding a scholarship certificate. He opened a door with frosted glass. Inside was a small conference room with nothing on the table but a glass carafe of water and a bowl of peppermints. "This is where I read letters," he said. "It's never dramatic. People expect drama. They get policy. And then the truth feels louder." I could see it in my mind, Mark sitting stiff in a chair. Sandra's smile cracking, Ethan spinning a coin between restless fingers. I could hear the phrases they would use: confused, unfair, heartless. And I could hear Thomas, calm and final no, Kliegel. Binding. I didn't hunger for that moment. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of it either. As I left, Nora handed me copies of my ID, a list of the new account freezes, and the key to my P.O. box. Her hand lingered briefly over mine. "You're steadier than they think," she said softly. In the lobby, a child tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing at a potted plant. She bent down, smiled, let him touch the leaves. I paused, watching, and thought that is what real care looks like. Permission without performance. Outside, the light was sharp. The city noisy with ordinary life: a delivery truck, a dog insisting on sniffing the sidewalk, someone laughing into a phone. I inhaled deeply, and for the first time in months, the breath went somewhere useful. That night I wrote 3 lines in my journal. Today I chose ink over noise. Today I learned silence is not absence. It is leverage. And today the opposite of drowning was not swimming. It was standing on the ground. I underlined the last line twice. Because for the first time, I knew where the ground was. And it was mine. The following morning, the house was too quiet. Not peaceful. Quiet in the way a stage is quiet when the actors haven't yet realized the audience has already taken their seats. I moved through the kitchen with deliberate slowness. I placed my pillbox on the table, Monday through Sunday in bold letters. I wanted it visible, evidence of order. Proof against the whispers Sandra had already begun sprinkling into conversations. She's forgetful. She's slipping. I brewed coffee strong enough to peel paint and wrote a simple grocery list on a yellow sheet of paper. Milk, eggs, bread to olive oil. Then, with the same calmness, I slid the list into a plain manila envelope, added 2 blank checks, and crossed my name out with heavy black ink. On the front, in tidy block letters, I wrote for Mark. I set the envelope in the middle of the kitchen counter, where the morning light would fall on it like a spotlight. Then I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat at the table, and waited. Linda's heels announced her before she did. Sharp clicks down the hallway, confident, possessive, as though each step renewed her deed to the house. She entered. Silk blouse too bright for the hour, phone in hand like a second pulse. Her eyes landed on the envelope. A pause, a narrowing. Then, sugar in her voice, Mark. There's something for you here. From the den, my son's voice floated back, flat, distracted. Hold it for me. Linda didn't wait. She slid a manicured nail under the flap and opened it herself. The paper whispered its complaint. I didn't turn my head. I let the steam from my coffee fog my glasses. The pause told me when she saw the blank checks. The huff told me she didn't like the black ink scrawled across my name. It's a grocery list, she said, disappointment curling at the edges. She set the papers down too neatly, the way people do when they want you to know they touched something, but didn't find what they wanted. She didn't look at me, she didn't ask. She just walked away, her perfume lingering like judgment. Minutes later, Jason slouched into the kitchen, earbuds dangling, face lit by his phone's glow. He glanced at the counter, then at me. "What's that?" he asked. "Nothing." Linda called from the other room. "Just a reminder your grandmother needs milk." Jason smirked, scrolling. "DoorDash exists, Mom. Be useful." The words landed like rotten fruit, heavy and sticky. Meant to bruise but not remembered tomorrow. He snatched a banana from the counter, peeled it carelessly, and left the peel beside the envelope, as if mocking its emptiness. I sipped my coffee and said nothing. Because silence, when you've shaped it right, is sharper than speech. Later, when the house thinned out, I opened my journal and wrote in clean lines, envelope left in plain sight. Linda opened it without hesitation. Jason dismissed it without thought. Neither reached for me. Both reached for paper. I underlined the last sentence twice. They had revealed themselves. Not by what they said, but by where their eyes went when they thought no one was watching. That afternoon, Mrs. Carter from 2 houses down knocked on the side door with her usual gentle persistence. She carried a carton of eggs and a jar of peach preserves. "Bought extra at the farmer's market," she said, which in her language meant, "I bought these for you." "How are you today?" she asked, eyes studying me with the kind of attention that makes lying unnecessary. "I'm vertical," I said, "and grateful." She tapped my pillbox lightly, like blessing it. "If anyone says otherwise, you send them to me. You're steady as stone." It hit me harder than I expected. Those simple words from a neighbor with no stake in my finances, no claim on my loyalty. Just kindness, unadorned. I nodded, throat tight. "Thank you, Ruth." She winked. "Save the first name for when I swear." And then she was gone, leaving the kitchen warmer than any heater could make it. That evening, we gathered at the table. Mark talked about flights to Cancun. Linda scrolled through rental properties. Jason shoveled food without looking up. I cleared my throat, so I said evenly. Mark looked up, surprised. "So what, Mom?" "Nothing," I said, smiling thinly. Just seeing if anyone was listening. Jason chuckled without glancing up. "We hear you, old lady." The words slid across the table like a blade. But instead of cutting me down, it carved something new inside me. I set down my fork gently, deliberately, and wrote a note in my mind. He has no idea the ground has already shifted. Later that night, after dishes were stacked and the TV murmured its canned laughter, I returned to my journal. I wrote 3 lines. Careful and deliberate, they reach for envelopes, not for hands. They call me dramatic to mask their fear. They mistake silence for weakness. They will learn otherwise. I closed the book and set it neatly beside my lamp. For the first time in years, I slept without dreams. The morning light spilled across the kitchen like a spotlight on an empty stage. I had been awake since dawn, my mind rehearsing. Silence was no longer my shield, it was my scalpel. And scalpel work requires patience. I opened the drawer of the desk where I kept old bank envelopes. Inside was a stack of papers, expired insurance notices, outdated credit card statements, and a few blank sheets I'd folded years ago to pad the pile. To anyone not looking closely, they looked like financial records. I slid them into a large manila envelope, sealed it, and wrote in tidy block letters, "Property deed Harper House." Then I placed it deliberately on the dining table, angled just so the afternoon sun would catch the black ink. Jason saw it first. He strolled into the kitchen, yawning, earbuds still dangling, phone in hand. His eyes skimmed the table, landed on the envelope, and for once, his thumb stopped scrolling. He reached for it casually, glancing over his shoulder as though the act required stealth. "Don't touch that," I said from the doorway, my voice calm. He froze, hand halfway to the paper. "What is it?" he asked, his tone light but his eyes sharp. "Something that isn't yours," I said. He smirked, covering his unease with bravado. "Relax, Mom." "Just curious." "Curiosity," I said, as a way of revealing hunger. He snorted, grabbed a banana, and left without another word. But I saw it, the flicker of frustration, the calculation. He wanted that envelope. He wanted what he thought was inside. That evening, while I was folding laundry in my room, I heard the soft shuffle of paper from the dining area. When I stepped into the hall, I saw Linda standing at the table, the envelope open in her hands. She looked up, startled, then quickly composed herself. "Oh, I was just tidying up," she said smoothly. "Didn't want this left out in the open." I walked over slowly, held out my hand. "Thank you, I'll take it." Her eyes lingered on the envelope, her smile just a fraction too tight. "Of course," she said, slipping it back. As she walked away, I caught the faintest mutter under her breath, "Careless." She hadn't meant me to hear it. But I did. That night I opened my journal and wrote a "Jason reached first," curiosity sharp as a blade. Linda followed, pretending concern. Both wanted what they thought was paper. Neither asked what I wanted. Neither asked if I was okay. I underlined the word neither 3 times. The following day I prepared a second test. This one smaller, subtler. I wrote out a check, not valid, not signed, made out to, cash, in the amount of $25,000. I crossed out the signature line with heavy ink and tucked it halfway into a folder labeled Trust Account. I left the folder on the kitchen counter as though I had been careless. Then I waited. Daniel arrived that afternoon, his work boots leaving dust on the mat. He saw the folder, frowned, and picked it up carefully. "Mom, this was left out," he said, carrying it to me. "Thank you," I said simply. He didn't open it. He didn't ask. He just handed it over like a man returning something sacred. For a moment, my throat tightened with shame and relief all at once. Shame for how many years I had mistaken his bluntness for rudeness, his silence for distance. Relief because in that instant, I knew Daniel was still the one who chose me, not what I carried. That evening, Linda cornered me in the kitchen. "I noticed you've been going through your files," she said, her tone light, practiced. "Yes," I said. "You know, it might be wise to let Mark and me help. We don't want you to get overwhelmed." "I'm not overwhelmed," I said. Her smile tightened. "Of course not. Just paperwork can be confusing." Jason, lounging in the doorway, added with a smirk, "Especially when you're getting older, Grandma." I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch, thick as smoke. Finally, Linda cleared her throat. "Well, just offering." They left, their whispers trailing down the hall. Later that night, I retrieved the envelope from its hiding spot and opened my journal. Daniel returned the folder untouched. Linda circled like a vulture. Jason mocked. "Patterns are louder than words." I sat back in my chair, the lamps glow soft around me, and realized something had shifted. For years, I had been the one tested by neglect, by cruelty, by silence. Now I was the one testing them. And the results were as clear as ink on paper. It isn't always the shove into the lake that drowns you. Sometimes it's the 1,000 small hands reaching for your pockets while you're still gasping for air. But tonight, I wasn't gasping. I was watching, measuring, recording, and every test brought me closer to the truth I needed, who loved me, and who only loved what I could give. Dinner that night carried the weight of a stage performance. The roast chicken on the table, the mashed potatoes, the bowl of green beans, all of it was props. The real play wasn't about food. It was about hunger of another kind. I had chosen the menu carefully. Comfort food. Something they would associate with safety. I wanted them relaxed, unsuspecting, so that when I spoke, their masks would slip. Daniel arrived first, shoulders stooped from work, but he brought a basket of bread he'd baked himself. He set it down without fanfare, muttered, "Smells good, Mom," and took his seat. Mark and Linda came next. Linda wore that polished smile she saved for company, though there was no one here but us. Mark looked tired, like always, his tie crooked. His eyes dulled from work he hated but never admitted out loud. Jason arrived last, sauntering in with his phone still glowing in his hand. He didn't sit until I told him twice. We began in silence, the clink of silverware filling the room. Halfway through the meal, I set down my fork. "I was going through some old papers this week," I said casually, watching their faces. Lindason's eyes flickered. Daniel just kept eating. "Oh," Mark said. "What kind of papers? Property records? Old checks? Trust accounts?" I let the words hang like bait over water. Jason smirked. "Sounds dramatic, Grandma. You finally writing your will or something?" Linda laughed lightly, though her eyes didn't. "Jason," she scolded, then turned to me. "Of course, it's wise to stay organized. We'd be happy to help, if it feels like too much." Daniel's fork paused midair. "She's capable of handling her own papers," he said flatly. Linda's smile faltered for half a second before she plastered it back on. I sipped my water, steady. "I suppose it is a lot, after all these years. Especially deciding who should manage things once I'm not here." Mark shifted in his seat. "Well, naturally, the family willed." "Which family?" I interrupted softly. The question froze the table. Jason laughed too loud. "Come on, Grandma, obviously us. Who else would it be?" Daniel set his fork down, eyes narrowing. "Maybe the person she trusts, not the person who wants it most." Jason rolled his eyes. "Oh, please. Don't act like you don't want your piece too." Daniel leaned forward, his voice sharp. "I want her safe, Jason. That's all." The tension crackled like static in the air. Linda reached for her wine glass, her fingers trembling just slightly. I folded my napkin slowly, deliberately. "Funny thing," I said. "When I left an envelope out the other day, everyone had such different reactions." Linda's glass froze mid-air. Jason blinked, then forced a smirk. "What envelope?" "The one labeled property deed." The silence was telling. Jason shifted in his seat. "That was nothing. Just a piece of paper." "Yes," I said. "But you reached for it, Jason, so did Linda." Daniel, on the other hand, brought it straight to me. Linda's smile cracked. "We were only concerned you'd misplaced something important." "Of course," I said, my tone even. Concern is an interesting word. It often reveals itself as curiosity in disguise. No one spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the old kitchen clock. I let the silence stretch until it grew unbearable, then said quietly, "I am not confused. I am not slipping. I am watching." Mark's fork clattered against his plate. Linda's lips pressed thin. Jason muttered something under his breath, too low for me to catch, but his smirk was gone. Daniel met my eyes across the table, and for the first time in years, I saw something there. Something that looked like respect. I leaned back, folded my hands, and smiled thinly. "Eat your dinner. It's getting cold." Later that night, when the house had gone quiet, I opened my journal and wrote at dinner. I tested them openly. Linda disguised greed as concern. Jason mocked, but his hands betrayed him. Mark stayed silent, too tired to take a side. Daniel spoke, not for himself, but for me. The lines are drawn now, clearer than ever. I underlined the last sentence 3 times. For the first time since the lake, I felt something I had thought was gone. Not just resolve, power. The house had its usual rhythm in the days after that dinner, but underneath, the beat had changed. I could feel it. My silence had unsettled them. Linda moved through the rooms with a tighter smile. Jason avoided my eyes. Mark said less than ever. Only Daniel carried himself the same, as though nothing about him needed hiding. But tension has a way of building, like steam under a sealed pot, and sooner or later, the lid rattles. It was a Thursday evening. I had just finished watering the potted plants in the living room when I heard voices drifting from the back deck. Linda's voice first, clipped and low. "We can't drag this out forever. Mark, your mother's a liability. If she slips even once." "She hasn't." Mark interrupted weakly. Jason laughed, that sharp, cruel sound that had cut through me by the lake. "Come on, Dad. She almost drowned in 3 feet of water. She's old. She's confused. We need to think about the future. The fund. Linda began. Yes, the fund, Jason said. It's basically mine already. We're just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. I froze in the hallway, my nails digging into the doorframe. Mark's voice dropped lower, but I still caught the words. Maybe it's time we talk to someone. Placement. Just options. Placement. The words sliced through me sharper than Jason's shove into the lake. Facility. Nursing home. Removal. Out of the picture. I pressed both palms against the wall to steady myself. For years, I had absorbed small humiliations, the eye rolls, the dismissals, the old-fashioned jokes. I had told myself to stay quiet, to keep the peace. But hearing my own son call me a liability, that was the breaking point. Something inside me hardened, cold and steady. I walked back to my room, sat at my desk, and opened my journal. The pen felt like a sword in my hand. They have said the word out loud now. Facility. Placement. They plot my disappearance as if I am already gone. But they forget I am still here. And I am listening. At breakfast, I sat at the table with my coffee, watching them. Jason scrolled his phone. Linda poured orange juice with that polished smile. Mark adjusted his tie. Finally, I spoke. I overheard your conversation last night. 3 heads snapped up. What conversation? Mark asked quickly. The one about placing me in a facility, I said calmly. Silence. Then Linda laughed too brightly. Oh, Maggie, you must have misheard. I didn't mishear, I said sharply. My voice carried a weight I hadn't used in years. You said I was a liability. Mark flushed. Jason smirked. Linda's smile froze. You think you're clever, I continued. You think you can shove me aside like I'm furniture you've outgrown. But let me be perfectly clear. And I am not done. Jason muttered. So dramatic. I turned to him, eyes steady. Do you know what the opposite of dramatic is, Jason? Dead. And I am very much alive. The silence that followed was thick and choking. No one laughed. When they finally left the table, I sat alone with my coffee. My hands trembled. Not from weakness, but from the energy of standing my ground. I opened my journal again and wrote. They tried to laugh me out of my own life. But today I reminded them I am not leaving quietly. The breaking point has come. The next move will not be theirs. It will be mine. It isn't the lake that drowns you. It's the people who stand on the dock, watching. But now, I was no longer in the water. I was on the shore, pen in hand, ready to write the ending myself. And if they wanted to call me a liability, I would show them the cost of underestimating a woman who had finally chosen silence as her weapon. The morning after the breaking point, the house looked the same, but nothing in it felt the same. Jason's sneakers in the hallway. Linda's perfume hanging in the air. Mark's briefcase on the chair. These were no longer familiar things. They were reminders. Symbols of how quickly love had been traded for convenience, loyalty for greed. I didn't eat breakfast. I didn't speak. I only picked up my purse, slipped my journal inside, and left without telling them where I was going. Some journeys are too important to announce. When I arrived at Thomas Green's office, Nora greeted me like she had been waiting. She offered coffee this time, not water. Strong, black, steady. Sir, Green is ready for you, she said. Thomas rose from behind his desk. Maggie, good to see you again. You look different. Different? Resolved, he said simply. I sat down, opened my journal, and slid it across to him. The last entry was underlined. They have said the word out loud now. Facility. Placement. Thomas read silently, then looked up. Then it's time we strengthen the walls. I want to make sure of 2 things, I said, my voice steady. 1. They can't touch my money while I'm alive. 2. When I'm gone, they can't profit from my death. Thomas nodded. Then here's what I suggest. He wrote as he spoke. His pen quick, deliberate. Convert the education fund into a restricted trust, not accessible to any heir. Add a no contest clause to the will. Anyone who challenges loses everything. Establish a charitable foundation in my name. Margaret Harper Fund, to receive any remaining assets. Draft a healthcare directive naming Frank as sole proxy, with Nora as secondary. Transfer the house deed into a life estate mine until my last breath, then donated to the Community Land Trust. And finally, he said, we prepare a sealed letter, to be read in this office if they ever attempt to act against you. He slid a blank sheet toward me. This one has to come from you. I stared at the paper, pen trembling in my hand. Then I began to write to those who stood by as I was pushed, to those who called me a liability, to those who mistook silence for surrender. Understand this. Your inheritance was my love, and you squandered it. You will not have my money. You will not have my home. You will have only the memory of what you chose to laugh at, and the loss of what you thought was already yours. I signed my name, firm and sharp. Margaret Harper. Thomas read it, then nodded once. Clear. Legal. Final. Nora entered, efficient as ever, carrying a notary stamp. She witnessed my signature, pressed the seal into the page, and slid the document into a heavy envelope. This will stay here, Thomas said. Safe. Ready. For the first time in months, I felt the air in my lungs expand without resistance. As I left his office, Thomas walked me to the door. One thing, Maggie, he said. Yes. If you are going to disappear, disappear into something. People do better walking toward than away. I smiled faintly. I'm not vanishing into a hole. I'm moving into a life where the quiet isn't a punishment. Good, he said. And when they say you ran, remember doors are not escapes. They are choices. That night, back at my desk, I opened my journal once more. Today I chose. Today I built walls they cannot climb. Today I gave my silence a shape. And today, I wrote the ending they thought they owned. I closed the book. For the first time since the lake, I slept not as a woman waiting to be pushed, but as one who had already moved beyond the dock. The first sign came on a Tuesday morning. Jason stomped into the kitchen, face red, phone clutched in his hand like it had betrayed him. Grandma, my debit card got declined. Twice. I looked up from my coffee, and his voice cracked. It's linked to the fund. You know the account Dad said willed. Stop. I said, calm but sharp. That account was never yours. He blinked, thrown off balance. For the first time, he didn't have a smirk ready. He stormed out, muttering under his breath, the screen of his phone glowing like a useless weapon. By afternoon, Mark came home early from work, his tie askew, eyes stormy. He dropped his briefcase onto the counter with a thud. Mom, the bank called me. They said I don't have authorization to make inquiries on your accounts anymore. What did you do? I put locks on doors that were never yours to open. I replied evenly. His jaw tightened. You don't understand. No, I interrupted. I understand perfectly. You thought you could walk through doors that weren't yours. You just never expected them to close. He rubbed his forehead, silent, but the anger was there, simmering. Linda tried a different tactic. That evening she poured 2 glasses of wine, slid one across the table to me, and sat down with her brightest smile. Maggie, darling, she said. There seems to be some confusion with the accounts. Of course we only want to help. If you just let us. There is no confusion, I said, meeting her eyes. The accounts are mine. The decisions are mine. And you will not be involved. Her smile stiffened, the corners of her mouth straining. You're being adversarial. No, I said softly. I'm being precise. She set her glass down too hard, the stem rattling. She didn't finish her wine. 2 nights later, the dam broke. We sat at the table again. Daniel on one side, Mark and Linda opposite, Jason sulking at the end with his phone. The tension was thick, buzzing like static. Mark slammed his fork down. This is ridiculous, Mom. We're your family. You're shutting us out. I set my napkin down calmly. Family doesn't plot to put each other in facilities. Jason scoffed. You're blowing this out of proportion. We were joking. I leaned forward. Were you joking when you said the fund was basically yours? Were you joking when you called me a liability? Silence. Daniel cleared his throat. She's right. I heard enough to know it wasn't a joke. Mark turned on him. Stay out of this, Daniel. No, Daniel said firmly. I won't. She's your mother, not your paycheck. Jason's chair screeched back as he stood. This is so dramatic. No, I said, my voice steady as stone. This is the truth, and you don't get to rewrite it anymore. The room went dead quiet. For once, Jason didn't have a comeback. That night I wrote in my journal, the fallout has begun. Mark fumes. Linda plots behind her smile. Only Daniel stands steady. The locks are holding. The walls are built. They are learning that my silence is not absence. It is power. I closed the book, my hands no longer trembling. For decades, I had been the one waiting for their approval. Their scraps of affection, their crumbs of respect. Now they were the ones waiting for access, waiting for loopholes, waiting for me to falter. But I would not falter. The dock was behind me. The lake was calm, and for the first time, the ground beneath me was mine alone. The house had been humming with a tension so thick, even the walls seemed to hold their breath. Every door closed harder than it needed to. Every word spoken was laced with something sharp, hidden beneath false civility. I knew it was only a matter of time before the dam cracked. It happened on a Saturday evening. The air outside was golden with sunset, the lake shimmering like molten glass. Inside, the kitchen smelled of garlic and herbs. I had roasted a chicken, though none of them deserved the comfort of it. Mark wasn't home yet. He always found excuses to stay late at work when things grew heavy. But Linda and Jason, they never ran from confrontation. They thrived on it. I was rinsing the carving knife when I heard the click of Linda's heels behind me. Jason slouched in after her, phone tucked in his back pocket for once, eyes narrowed. "We need to talk," Linda said, her voice crisp, rehearsed. I dried my hands slowly, set the towel down, and turned. "Go ahead." Linda folded her arms, her smile tight enough to crack porcelain. "Maggie, this has gone far enough. You've changed passwords. You've frozen accounts. You're making decisions that affect all of us without including us." "All of you?" I asked. "Or just you?" Her smile twitched, but she pressed on. "We're your family. That means we should be involved in managing things. Your home, your finances, your care." Jason chimed in, his tone sharp. "Look, Grandma, you can't keep playing these games. Either you let Dad and Mom handle things, or what?" I asked quietly. "Or we'll have no choice but to step in legally," Linda said, her voice steady but her eyes flashing. "Guardianship, placement, whatever it takes to ensure things are handled responsibly." The word hung in the air, guardianship. I felt the weight of the moment press down, the way lake water had once pressed against my chest. But this time I did not thrash, I did not gasp, I smiled, small, deliberate, cold. "So that's your ultimatum. Hand over my life, or you'll take it by force." Linda's chin lifted. "It's for your own good," Jason snorted. "Don't be so dramatic." The phrase, the same words he had used as I drowned, sparked something inside me, not fury, but a clarity sharper than glass. I stepped closer, my voice low but strong. "Do you know what's dramatic, Jason? Watching your grandson laugh as you choke on water. Listening to your son call you a liability. Seeing your daughter-in-law lick her lips at the thought of your property. That's drama, and I have lived it." Their faces froze. I leaned on the counter, steady. "You think you have power here. But you've forgotten one thing. I still hold the pen, and with it, I have already written the ending. The deeds, the accounts, the directives, they are sealed, locked, witnessed. Even if you drag me into a courtroom tomorrow, all you will prove is your greed." Jason's face flushed crimson. "You wouldn't." "I already have," I cut in. Linda's mask cracked for the briefest second, her composure faltering. Then she turned away sharply, muttering, "This isn't over." "No," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a blade. "It has only begun." That night, after they had stormed off to whisper in some other room, I sat at my desk and opened my journal. They delivered their ultimatum: surrender or be erased. But what they don't know is that my story is already written in ink, notarized, sealed. Their threats are only whined against a locked door. Tomorrow, I will show them the strength of silence with witnesses to hear it. I closed the journal, slid it into the drawer, and for the first time in years, I felt not fear, but anticipation. Because when the storm comes, the walls I built will not fall. The ultimatum had been spoken, and in their arrogance, they believed the threat itself was enough to shake me. It didn't. It steadied me. I knew what came next. If I waited, they would strike. Guardianship, facility. They would find some doctor willing to scribble a few careless words and call it truth. So I moved first. Friday morning, the air was brisk and clean, the lake calm enough to mirror the sky. I dressed carefully, not out of vanity but intent: navy blouse, pressed slacks, the silver brooch Henry had given me on our 15th anniversary. I wanted to look like what I was, competent, deliberate, unshaken. At 9:45, Frank's old Chevy appeared at the curb. He didn't roll down the window. He just tipped 2 fingers off the wheel. I nodded back. That was our language. No fuss, no pity. Just presence. At 10 sharp, I stepped into Thomas Green's office through the side entrance. Nora greeted me with her usual calm efficiency. "The evaluator is here, Mrs. Harper. Dr. Patel. We'll use the conference room." Dr. Shirley Patel was a woman about my age, her dark hair streaked with silver, her posture straight as a ruler. She rose when I entered, shook my hand firmly. "Good morning, Mrs. Harper," she said. "This isn't a test. It's a conversation. My role is simple: to document what you already know about yourself." I smiled faintly. I like conversations like that. For 45 minutes, we spoke. She asked me today's date. I answered without hesitation. She asked about the president. I named him and his predecessor. She asked about my finances, my healthcare wishes, my family. I told her about the pillbox I filled each Sunday night, about the safe deposit box at Glenview Credit Union, about the P.O. box where Thomas sent documents. I told her about Frank, about Nora, about the journal I kept daily without fail. When she asked about my family, I didn't flinch. One son honest but overlooked. One son hungry but complicit. One daughter-in-law who sees me as furniture. One grandson who laughs while I drown. Her pen slowed at that, but she didn't interrupt. Finally, she asked, "What do you want most, Mrs. Harper?" "Agency," I said. Then, after a pause and quiet, "The kind that's earned." She wrote those words as though they were medical fact. At the end, she set her pen aside. "It is my professional opinion that you have decisional capacity. I will send a signed letter to Mr. Green's office this afternoon." I stood, shook her hand. It felt like shaking the hand of someone at a finish line that was also a beginning. Thomas walked me down the hall to the small conference room. On the table sat nothing but a glass carafe of water and a bowl of peppermints. "This is where I read letters," he reminded me. "No drama. Just policy. And the truth sounds louder for it." I sat in one of the chairs, looked across at the empty seats, and pictured them occupied: Mark's wary eyes, Linda's brittle smile, Jason's restless coin spinning between his fingers. I could hear the words they'd used: confused, unfair, heartless. And I could hear Thomas, steady and final: no, clear, legal, final. The thought did not frighten me, it steadied me. When I returned that afternoon, the house was alive with noise. Linda on the phone in the kitchen, Jason blasting music upstairs, Mark pacing in the living room with paperwork in hand. I set my purse on the counter, poured myself a glass of water, and waited. It didn't take long. Mark entered first, his voice tight. "Mom, the bank said there've been changes." "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because it doesn't concern you," I said. Linda appeared in the doorway, smile sharp as glass. "Maggie, you're being unreasonable. We're just trying to protect you." Jason came down the stairs, smirking. "More like she's hiding things." I set my glass down carefully. "You call it hiding. I call it living. And today, a doctor documented I am capable. I am deliberate, and I am in charge of my life." Their faces shifted. Mark's pale, Linda's tight, Jason's openly mocking. But beneath their reactions, I saw at the first flicker of fear. That night, I wrote, "Today I stepped into the light. Today my silence was witnessed, notarized, documented. They cannot twist it, they cannot erase it. When they whisper, facility, I will answer with paper that shouts, capacity." I underlined the word capacity twice, because now even their threats had no air to breathe. The letter from Dr. Patel arrived 2 days later, neatly folded in a cream envelope addressed to Thomas Green's office. I had asked for a copy, and when Nora slid it across the desk to me, her expression carried the quiet satisfaction of a woman who knew its weight. Or Mrs. Margaret Harper demonstrates full decisional capacity. 9 words, stamped, signed, and witnessed. 9 words that dismantled the storm my family had been brewing. Linda was the first to notice. She came into the kitchen holding her phone, her manicured nails tapping against the screen. "I spoke with a friend at church," she said, her tone too casual. "She knows a doctor who specializes in elder evaluations. We could get a second opinion, just to be safe." I sipped my tea. "I already had one." She blinked. "Without us. Especially without you." Her smile froze, and for a moment, I saw the fury flash behind her eyes. She masked it quickly, but masks are fragile things. That evening, Jason cornered me in the hallway. "Grandma, come on," he said, his voice pitched higher than usual. "You don't actually believe these lawyers and doctors care about you, right? They just want your money." I looked at him, at the grandson I had once rocked to sleep during thunderstorms. "And what is it you want, Jason?" He opened his mouth, closed it, then sneered. "You're unbelievable." He stormed off, his sneakers pounding against the stairs like a tantrum from a child long grown. Mark avoided me altogether. He left earlier for work, came home later, and spoke only when pressed. But silence can be louder than shouting, and his silence was drenched in shame. He had heard the word facility come out of his own mouth, and now he couldn't look me in the eye. 3 nights later, I woke to the faint scrape of a drawer in the study. I rose quietly, my knees stiff but my senses sharp, and crept down the hall. There, in the dim glow of the desk lamp, stood Linda, rifling through my files. She froze when she saw me in the doorway. "Oh, Maggie," she said too sweetly. "I was just looking for the insurance paperwork. Mark mentioned it. Those aren't your drawers," I said coldly. Her hand hovered over a folder labeled trust account. "Put it back." For the first time since I had known her, Linda's smile faltered completely. Her lips tightened, her eyes narrowed, and for a heartbeat, I saw the truth. Not a polished woman, but a predator caught mid-prowl. She closed the folder slowly, slid it back, and stepped away. "You're making this adversarial," she said, her voice like ice. "No," I replied, my voice steady. "You are." Later, in the quiet of my room, I wrote, "They are unraveling. Linda sneaks, Jason rages, Mark hides. Each step they take to grasp tighter only shows their hands more clearly. And Daniel, silent, steady, remains the only one who does not reach for paper before reaching for me. Control isn't taken in one blow. It erodes like shoreline stone under relentless waves. But sometimes when the waves crash too hard, the rock reveals what it has always been made of. Linda and Jason thought they could wear me down. But it wasn't me unraveling. It was them. And soon, everyone would see it. The storm had been building for weeks, and by the time it broke, I knew the signs. Jason's restless pacing. Linda's brittle cheerfulness, cracking at the edges. Mark's silence, weighted with shame. They had tried whispers, manipulation, threats. Now, they were ready to gamble. It was a Thursday evening when the envelope appeared on the kitchen counter. Addressed to First National Bank, neatly sealed, with my name scrawled across the flap. Except it wasn't my handwriting. I picked it up, turned it over, slid a letter opener through the seam. Inside was a request form, withdrawal authorization from my trust account. At the bottom, a shaky attempt at my signature. Jason's sneakers squeaked behind me. "Oh, Grandma. You weren't supposed to see that yet." Linda appeared in the doorway, her smile too smooth. "It's just a draft, Maggie. Mark thought maybe." "Mark didn't write this." I cut in, holding up the paper. "And you both know it." Jason's smirk faltered. Linda's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. "Forgery?" I said clearly. "Do you know what the penalty is?" Linda stepped forward, her tone sharpening. "No one's trying to hurt you. We're trying to protect what's coming anyway." "Why fight us?" "Because it was never yours," I said. Mark walked in just then, briefcase still in hand. He saw the paper in mine, the color drained from his face. "Mom," he whispered. "Did you know about this?" I asked. His lips trembled. "They told me it was just paperwork, just a formality." "It's a crime," I said flatly. Jason barked a laugh. "Oh, come on. No one's going to arrest family." But Mark didn't laugh. His eyes finally met mine, wet and ashamed. "I didn't sign. I didn't stop them either. And that's on me." For the first time I saw in him not malice but defeat, and maybe regret. The next morning, Daniel came by unannounced. Work boots dusty, hair damp from rain. "Mom," he said, stepping inside, "Linda called me last night. Said you were acting unstable. Wanted me to sign some papers backing them up." I gripped the counter. "And," he pulled a folded document from his pocket, laid it flat. "I told her to go to hell." It was another forged affidavit. This one claiming I was incapable of managing my affairs. Daniel's name had been typed beneath a blank signature line. I stared at it, my heart pounding. They weren't just whispering now. They were building a case. That afternoon, I called Thomas Green. My voice didn't shake. "They've tried forgery," I said. "They've tried coercion. What's next?" "Court," he replied. "But they'll lose." "You have evaluations, witnesses, and a journal," I said. "Yes," Thomas agreed. "Ink is stronger than rumor." He paused, then added, "If you're ready, we can move to the next step, filing your will, the trust documents, and the letter. It will end the game before they even think they're winning." I closed my eyes, pictured the lake, the dock, the faces that had watched me drown. "I'm ready," I said. That evening I didn't wait for them to come to me. I called them into the living room. Mark, Linda, Jason. Daniel stood quietly in the corner, arms folded. On the table sat the forged documents, side by side. "I know what you've done," I said. Forgery, lies. Manipulation. You've shown me exactly who you are. Jason rolled his eyes. Dramatic as always. No, I said. Final. Linda's smile vanished. You wouldn't dare. I already did, I said. The papers are filed. The trust is sealed. The house is gone from your reach. When I die, you will inherit nothing but the memory of what you chose to do here. The silence was absolute. Mark sank into a chair, covering his face with his hands. Jason muttered curses under his breath. Linda stared at me, eyes blazing, then turned away sharply. That night, in the quiet of my room, I wrote they made their final attempt, and it broke them instead of me. The walls are too high, the locks too strong. Soon the ending will come, not by their hand, but by mine, in ink, in choice. This is not drowning. This is standing on solid ground at last. Families unravel in two ways, slowly, thread by thread, or all at once when someone pulls too hard. They pulled too hard. And now the whole weave was coming apart, piece by piece, until the only fabric left was truth. Thomas Green's conference room was as spare as a verdict. A glass carafe of water. A bowl of peppermints. 4 chairs facing one. I chose the single chair, not because I wanted distance, but because I wanted angles that made the truth travel cleanly. Nora set a slim recorder on the table. For the file, she said, voice calm as a level. Frank took a seat behind my shoulder, like a lighthouse. You don't have to look at to know it's working. Daniel stood along the wall, arms folded, a steady line in a room that would soon be full of the opposite. The side door opened. Mark came in first, jaw tight, eyes tired. Linda followed, smile already sharpened to a point. Jason slouched behind them, coin in hand, flipping it with the restless arrogance of a boy who thinks gravity is a suggestion. Thomas entered last. Thank you for coming, he said, taking his place at the head of the table. Today's meeting is informational. I'll read a statement of Mrs. Harper's wishes and the instruments already executed. You may ask clarifying questions. This is not a negotiation. Linda's smile thinned. Jason rolled the coin across his knuckles, rehearsed mischief in search of a stage. Mark stared at the carafe like it might offer absolution. Thomas lifted the top sheet. First, medical authority. Mrs. Harper has executed an advance directive and medical power of attorney naming Frank Dawson as primary agent, with Ms. Vance as alternate. Any statements to the contrary are superseded by these documents. He slid a copy across. The paper made the small, final sound paper makes when it stops being possibility and becomes law. Second, Thomas continued, the education fund, commonly and incorrectly referred to in your family as the college money, has been transformed into a restricted trust with 2 provisions. No distributions to heirs. Permitted use only for designated charitable purposes to be disclosed momentarily. Access requires a physical token and personal appearance by the trustee, who is Mrs. Harper. Jason's coin stilled. That's theft, he snapped. Thomas didn't look at him. It is the exercise of ownership by the owner. Linda leaned in, voice nectar sweet. Maggie, darling, you must have been confused when you... Thomas lifted a second sheet. On that note, a capacity letter from Dr. Shirley Petel, dated last Friday. Mrs. Margaret Harper demonstrates full decisional capacity. Signed, licensed, witnessed. Copies have been filed. He looked at Linda politely. Any further assertions of confusion should be supported with peer evidence or not at all. I watched the sentence pass through them. Mark flinched like it had found an old wound. Linda blinked just once, as if light had been turned up a notch against her will. Jason smirked and reached for his coin again. Third, Thomas said, the will. It has been revised with a not contest clause. If any heir challenges and loses, they forfeit any remaining bequests. He paused to let the words settle. To be precise, there are no direct bequests to challenge. The bulk of the estate is directed elsewhere. Mark finally spoke, voice rough. Elsewhere where? Thomas turned a page. To the Margaret Harper Fund, an endowed foundation with 2 initial programs. 1 micro grants to community gardens and neighborhood food ops within the county. 2 scholarships for respiratory therapy students at the community college. He glanced at me, I nodded. Mrs. Harper has chosen to invest in breath and bread. Jason snorted. Cute. Frank shifted behind me. Daniel's mouth pressed into a line that wasn't quite a smile, wasn't quite a bruise. Linda's voice dropped the sugar. So you're cutting your family out. I met her eyes. I am cutting out entitlement. Family is welcome to show up as family. Thomas set the next document flat. Finally, the house. Deeded into a life estate, Mrs. Harper retains full possession and control for the duration of her life. Upon her passing, the property conveys to the Community Land Trust. No sale, no encumbrance, no trophy. Jason's chair scraped back. You can't do this. She already did, Thomas said. Today's gathering is not to seek your approval. It is to prevent your confusion. Nora slid a small stack of photographs across. Time, stamped scans of signatures, the notary seal, the safe deposit log. Evidence turned into a quiet chorus, dun dun dun. Thomas folded his hands. There remains one addendum. He lifted a final envelope, the one I had signed last week. The one that began with words that had clawed their way out of me in the quiet. Mrs. Harper has prepared a letter to be read at her discretion. I nodded. Read it. He broke the seal and began. To those who stood by when I was pushed, to those who called me a liability, to those who mistook silence for surrender. Your inheritance was my love. You spent it early. You will not have my money. You will not have my home. You will have the memory of what you chose to laugh at, and the loss of what you thought was already yours. If you wish to be in my life, come as a son, not a claimant. If you wish to be in my kitchen, come with empty hands and a full heart. I am not leaving, I am living. Margaret Harper. No one moved. The room held still the way rooms do when something true has finally been said out loud. Jason found his mouth first. This is insane. Thomas turned to him, professional and unblinking. Mr. Harper, before you say more, I'll remind you that this meeting is recorded for the file. Attempted forgery of financial instruments was noted last week. If that behavior continues, this office will be obligated to refer the matter to the appropriate authorities. Color rose in Jason's face, anger crowding out sense. He looked to Mark, seeking a flank that wasn't there. Mark's shoulders sagged. Mom, he said, voice thick. I didn't sign anything, but I didn't stop them. That's mine to carry. I'm sorry. There are apologies that arrive like coupons, conditional, expiring. This wasn't one. It came heavy, unwrapped. I let it land. Then carry it differently, I said. You may come to dinner Sunday alone. He nodded once, eyes on the table. Linda lifted her chin. If you imagine we will accept this. This is not a restaurant, I said softly. There is nothing to send back. She turned to Thomas. There must be some recourse. There is always recourse, he said. You may retain counsel and file. You will then encounter a capacity letter, a no contest clause, documentary evidence of attempted fraud, and a trustee who is very good at her job. I do not advise it. Silence fell again, but it wasn't the charged silence of a fuse. It was the clean, emptied kind that follows a decision you cannot unmake. Thomas capped his pen. Unless there are clarifying questions, we're done. Jason shoved his chair, the legs complaining across the floor. He looked at me, coin clenched so tight the edge had cut his palm. You'll regret this, he spat. I thought of a boy with dandelions. I thought of a young man laughing as water closed over my head. I thought of the distance between those two people and all the rope I had given him to cross it. I already did, I said, once. He blinked, surprised by the absence of heat. Then he left, the door catching his shoulder because doors do not care whether you learned from them. Linda stood, gathered her purse with small, efficient motions, and gave me one last polished look meant to convey pity. It had no purchase. She followed Jason out. Mark lingered. Sunday, he said, and in the single word was a promise small enough to keep. Daniel didn't move until the hallway was quiet. Then he came to the table, picked up the peppermint bowl, and held it toward me with a wry tilt of the wrist. Victory mint, he asked. I took one, unwrapped it slowly. Witness mint, I said. Frank chuckled behind me, a sound like an old engine that had never once failed to start. Always liked a clean ending, he said. Thomas stacked the papers, squared their edges. It's not endings I practice, he said. It's boundaries. Nora clicked off the recorder. For the file, she said again. And I felt something loosen in my chest. The way a knot loosens not because it was forced, but because the rope has finally been threaded the right way. We left together by the side entrance. Outside the sky was the good kind of blue, ordinary, honest. A child across the street tugged his mother toward a patch of hydrangeas blooming too boldly for the strip of dirt they'd been given. She let him touch the petals, permission without performance. I let the image tuck itself somewhere I could reach later. On the drive home, Frank didn't talk. He didn't have to. We passed the little public garden I loved, staked tomatoes leaning into their twine with the confidence of anything watered on schedule. The hand-painted signs still read, "Take what you need, leave what you can. What will you leave?" Frank asked finally, not looking at me. "Braith," I said. "And bread." He nodded, like a man who can put his hat back on because the weather has decided what it is. At home, the lake was honest water again. No stage, no jury. Just a surface that reflected what stood above it. I stood at the kitchen window and watched a dragonfly skim along the dock line, alive purely because it never once considered the audience. That night, I opened my journal and wrote 3 lines. Small and steady. I did not win, I chose. I did not punish. I protected. I did not leave, I arrived. I closed the book and placed it where I always do, not as a secret, but as a tool I expect to need again. Because peace is not something you find once in frame. It's a practice. It's a schedule you keep with yourself. Sunday, I would set another place at my table. Not because he earned it with repentance, but because repair is work you don't outsource if you want it to hold. The others would stay away until they learned the difference between doors and demands. As for the rest, there would be letters to write to the college, a meeting with the community garden board, a list of names for the first micro-grants. Small lawful mercies. The kind that reroute rivers one steady shovel at a time. I turned off the lamp. The house exhaled. Somewhere in the dark, the clock said exactly what it always says, and what I had almost forgotten. That time moves either way. Forward if you choose it, around in circles if you don't. I had chosen. And in the morning, the tomatoes would still need watering. The silence in the house after the meeting wasn't peace. It was rubble. Jason stomped through the halls louder than usual. Doors slamming like punctuation to curses he muttered under his breath. Linda moved with clipped efficiency, her phone glued to her hand as she made call after call, her voice rising and falling like someone auditioning for sympathy. Mark sat longer in the den each night, the television flickering across his face but never catching his attention. And me, I moved quietly, deliberately. Because silence, in the right hands, is not surrender, it's strategy. 2 days later, Jason confronted me outright. "You ruined my life," he shouted, fists clenched at his sides. "That money was supposed to be mine." I looked at him, really looked. Not as a grandson, not as a boy with dandelions, not even as the young man who once dreamed of music. I looked at him as he was now a stranger shaped by greed. "It was never yours," I said evenly. He sneered. "Then what good are you anymore?" The words landed sharp, but they didn't pierce. "Not anymore. I'm good enough," I said softly, "to have survived the lake you tried to drown me in. And strong enough to make sure you never touch what isn't yours." For a moment, his bravado cracked. Then he stormed out, leaving behind the echo of his own failure. Linda tried a different route. She cornered me in the kitchen, her voice coated in sugar. "Maggie, you have to see reason. Donating everything away, leaving us with nothing. It isn't fair." "Fair," I repeated, as not a word I'll accept from someone who plotted to erase me. Her mask slipped then, sharpness flashing in her eyes. "You'll regret this," she hissed. I smiled faintly. I already regret raising silence when I should have raised boundaries. That mistake won't be repeated. She left without another word. That evening, Mark lingered after dinner, while the others retreated upstairs. He stood awkwardly in the doorway of my room. "Mom," he began, voice low, "I don't expect forgiveness. But I need you to know, I never wanted this to go so far. I was weak, I let them lead, and I'm sorry." I studied him carefully. His apology wasn't perfect, but it was unvarnished. "Then prove it," I said, "not to me, with words. To yourself, with actions." He nodded, shoulders sagging with the weight of a man finally realizing what he carried. Daniel continued as he always had, solid, unshaken. He fixed a leaky faucet without being asked, brought bread from the bakery, sat with me in silence when silence was enough. He didn't reach for papers, he didn't reach for promises. He reached only for presence. And that was more than enough. That night, I opened my journal. Jason rages. Linda schemes, Mark wavers, Daniel studies. The house is no longer united in deception. It fractures now, each of them revealing who they have always been. And me, I am no longer invisible. My silence has shape. My choices have teeth. For the first time, I am not gasping, I am breathing. I underlined the word breathing twice. It struck me then revenge was never the goal. Release was. And I had it now, in every sealed document, every notarized signature, every slammed door that no longer shook me. The lake had once threatened to pull me under. But I hadn't drowned. I had learned to stand. And in the quiet aftermath, I understood this was not the end of my story. It was the end of theirs. At least, the version they had tried to write for me. The morning of the announcement, the air smelled like new beginnings. Freshly cut grass, damp soil, the faint sweetness of late summer flowers. I stood at the small podium in the community garden, the very one where I had so often found peace. Rows of tomatoes and beans framed the crowd that had gathered. Neighbors, students, old friends, even strangers who had come because they'd heard whispers of something new. Beside me stood Thomas Green, papers neat in his hand. Frank sat in the front row, arms folded, eyes bright beneath his cap. Daniel hovered nearby, not as a guard but as an anchor. When Thomas finished the formalities, he turned the microphone to me. I took a breath. My knees ached, my shoulders twinged, but my voice was steady. Most of you know me simply as Margaret Harper, I began. Some know me as a neighbor, some as a friend, and some, sadly, as a liability. The crowd chuckled softly. Unsure if it was meant as humor, I let them. For years, I gave everything I had to my family, my time, my love, my savings. I believed that was what legacy meant. But I learned something hard. Legacy isn't what you give away to those who feel entitled. It's what you plant where it can grow. I gestured to the rows of vegetables around us. So today, I'm proud to announce the Margaret Harper Fund. Its first mission: to support community gardens like this one, and to provide scholarships for students studying respiratory therapy. Because once upon a time, a little boy in my arms said he wanted to help people breathe better. I'm planting that dream back into the world, where it belongs. Applause rippled through the garden. Some clapped softly, others stood, and in the back I saw Mrs. Carter, the neighbor who once brought me eggs and preserves, smiling with tears in her eyes. Mark stood off to the side, shoulders slumped, but he clapped too. Quietly, almost ashamed, but it was there. Daniel clapped louder, eyes proud. Jason didn't come. Linda didn't either. And for the first time, their absence felt like a blessing. That night I sat at my desk one last time with my journal open. Today I gave my silence a voice. Today I turned betrayal into seed, pain into bread, memory into breath. Jason will remember laughter on a dock. Linda will remember locked drawers. Mark may yet remember shame as a doorway to change. But the world will remember something else that I endured, I chose, and I gave. I underlined the last 3 words I gave. If there is a lesson in this story, it is this family is not defined by blood. It is defined by presence, by respect, by love freely given and not bartered. Silence is not weakness when it has a shape. And survival is not just refusing to sink. It is choosing where you stand when the water recedes. And now, to you, the listener, the witness to my story. Ask yourself, who have you let stand by the dock, unseen, unheard? Don't wait until regret writes your ending. Write it yourself, today, in ink, in action, in love. If this story moved you, share it so others may hear. Leave your thoughts below. Tell me what lesson you take from Margaret's choice. And above all, don't forget to subscribe to Telling Story with me for more stories that remind us, even in betrayal, even in silence, we still hold the pen.